The call came in at 02:17 a.m. I still smell the metallic tang of it sometimes, even 3 weeks later when I'm just trying to make coffee. It was the scent of a fresh, brutal spill on cold stone, layered over the sterile, high-end fragrance of money. A billionaire's house, a glass palace, why they called it. All sharp angles, automated lights, and silence that screamed louder than any witness. The kind of silence that only $400 million can buy, sealing away the world. I'm Detective Kaelen Vance. My job is to find the seam where the lie rips open, but in places like the Sterling residence, the lies are woven into the very fabric of the architecture. Silas Sterling, the gold billionaire. He built his empire on dirt and greed, refining ore into generational wealth, turning the earth's misery into diamonds and private jets. Now, his only daughter, the sharp, beautiful, utterly ruthless Darya Sterling, was just another expense, another problem for his security team to manage. I found her in the main foyer, a space designed to intimidate, 2 stories of polished white Italian marble. Darya was stretched out, almost gracefully, her deep crimson gown now just a texture against a pool of her own blood, spreading like a gruesome abstract painting. The knife, a silver letter opener, heavy, ornate, was still half buried in her upper chest. Her eyes, open and accusatory, reflected the cold, white ceiling lights. I knelt down, the expensive silence pressing in on me. I saw it all, the precise, devastating exit wound, the way her dark hair was fanned out. I watched the heiress bleed out, or rather, I watched where she had bled out, the final, irreversible moment having passed just before we arrived. Death was confirmed at 02:41 a.m. by the EMTs, who were not allowed to touch anything until my team gave the word. I, Kaelen Vance, stood there and absorbed the brutal, physical fact of Darya Sterling's demise. She was gone. Who found her? I asked my partner, Detective Ruiz, my voice too loud in the cathedral of death. The butler, Finch. Unflappable, even with this kind of mess, Ruiz replied, gesturing toward a stiff, elderly man standing by the massive steel and glass staircase. Finch looked less concerned about the murder and more concerned about the stain on the marble. That's the Sterling way. I approached Silas Sterling, who was standing in the shadows of the mezzanine, overlooking the scene like a Roman emperor viewing a minor tragedy. He was built like an old, tough miner, but dressed in silk pajamas, his face a landscape of hard lines and old money. "Detective Vance," he rumbled, his voice gravel and steel, "I trust you understand the delicacy of this situation." I met his gaze. "Sir, I understand that your daughter was stabbed in your home. The delicacy is reserved for the law, not the victim. Where were you?" Silas didn't flinch. He never flinched. That's how you make billions. In my wing, asleep, I heard nothing. My hearing isn't what it used to be. Darya and I, we had our differences. Business, mostly. She was aggressive. Too aggressive. Perhaps. Aggressive. That was the word they used for ambition when it belonged to a woman. I smelled the lie. It wasn't the metallic tang of blood, but something sweeter, thicker, the perfume of absolute power trying to cover up a felony. "And your son, Elias? I recall he lives here too." Silas's face tightened, a momentary flicker of genuine pain, quickly masked. "Elias is indisposed. He has been for nearly 2 years, since the accident. I knew about Elias Sterling, the younger son, the one who walked away from the gold mines, the boardrooms, the whole toxic circus, to become a kind of reckless philosopher. Until the accident. A motorcycle crash on a winding coastal road. "The coma patient," I murmured. "Precisely. He's at St. Jude's. Has been since the day he nearly died. He won't be talking to anyone, Detective." Silas paused, leaning over the glass railing. "You should focus on who had access. The servants, the disgruntled business associates. My daughter made a lot of enemies, a lot of rich enemies. I spent the next 18 hours wading through the family's history, financial records, and the sterile testimonies of the staff. No forced entry. The security system was flawless, designed by a former NSA specialist. The only people who came and went were family and a vetted staff. It screamed of an inside job, and all roads pointed to the man standing on the mezzanine, the one who benefited most, Silas Sterling. Darya had been preparing a hostile takeover of one of his biggest offshore funds. She was going to bleed him dry in the boardroom. He just beat her to it on the marble floor. I was back at the precinct, staring at a printout of Darya's autopsy report. The official time of death was placed squarely between 01:45 a.m. and 02 a.m., when the call came in from Detective Harper at the hospital liaison office. "Vance, you need to see this. St. Jude's security footage. It's impossible, but you need to see it now." I drove through the gray, exhausted morning. St. Jude's Hospital, clean and smelling of antiseptics, was a world away from the glass palace, but the disease of the Sterling family seemed to follow me. Harper led me to a small, windowless security room. He pulled up the footage. Timeline, 05:12 a.m. The camera was positioned at the end of the long, institutional corridor, leading to the high-security trauma wing, Elias Sterling's room. A figure emerged from the elevator bank. A woman. She was dressed in simple, dark clothing, a loose, thick cardigan, and a scarf wrapped high around her neck. But the way she moved, the subtle arrogance, the inherent posture of a person who has never had to ask for anything, was unmistakable. Harper zoomed in on her profile as she paused before Elias's door. My breath hitched. It was Darya Sterling, not like Darya. It was Darya, the high cheekbones, the almost too wide, intense dark eyes, the small, distinct mole near the corner of her right eye. And then, the undeniable proof, the kind of detail only an investigator would notice. A tiny, delicate tattoo of a coiled serpent, barely visible on the inside of her left wrist, just peeking out from under the cuff of the cardigan. I'd seen it in the morgue photos. I'd seen it on the corpse. I watched the heiress bleed out on the marble floor. She stood there for a long moment, her head bowed. There was no arrogance now, only a raw, bone-deep vulnerability I had never imagined she possessed. She opened the door silently, slipped inside, and the door clicked shut behind her. Timeline, 05:43 a.m. She reappeared, backing out slowly, closing the door as if sealing a tomb. Before she turned to leave, she pressed her forehead against the cool wood of the door for a few seconds, a gesture of grief, or perhaps farewell. She walked back down the corridor and vanished into the elevator bank. I stared at the paused image, Darya Sterling, alive, at 05:43 a.m. "What time did the ME put her TO'd?" Harper asked, his voice low with disbelief. "Between 01:45 and 02:00 a.m. That footage is nearly 4 hours after she was officially dead. After I saw the body. After the blood had dried on the marble. After I personally filed the report." I ran a hand over my face, feeling the cold, analytical structure of my world collapsing. DNA confusion? A twin? A look-alike? No twin according to family records. And that tattoo. It's too specific. It's her, Harper. It has to be. I felt the chilling weight of the paradox. I was the primary witness to her death. I saw the massive blood loss. The marble had drunk her life. But the camera, the impartial, unblinking eye of the security system, testified to her life. I found myself driving straight back to the glass palace. It wasn't logic guiding me. It was the need to physically confront the truth I had witnessed. Finch, the butler, let me in. The foyer was already sterile, the blood stain bleached away, the marble floor gleaming. It was almost pristine, as if the violence had never happened. I found Silas in his library, surrounded by first editions and the intoxicating scent of fine tobacco. He was reading a stock report, utterly composed. "Back so soon, detective," he said without looking up. "I have something to show you, Mr. Sterling. Something about Elias." I played the hospital footage on my tablet. I watched his cold, hard mask struggle to maintain itself. As Darya stepped out of the elevator, a small, barely perceptible tremor ran through his hands. crushing the expensive paper he held. "Who is that?" he demanded, his voice now a low, dangerous growl. "You tell me." She visited Darya Sterling at 05:12 a.m. His sister Darya died at 02:00 a.m. Same woman, same face, same tattoo. Silas finally looked up, his eyes 2 chips of ice. He stood, towering over me. "This is a grotesque stunt, Vance. Someone is trying to shake us down. Impersonation. It happens all the time with people of our stature." "Not with this level of detail, Mr. Sterling. Not when the person is supposed to be on a slab downtown. But let's talk about Elias. He's the key here, isn't he?" Darya loved him, the only person in this gilded cage she didn't want to conquer. My internal monologue was racing. Why would she go to him? A final goodbye, or something more? The will. Darya was the sole heiress now. If she died, everything went to Silas. Unless what, Vance? Get to the point. If Darya died, Silas gets the $12 billion inheritance, correct? If Elias dies in that coma, you get his share of the Sterling Gold Fund too. But what if Darya had an alternate will? Something leaving everything to Elias, to hold it safe until he woke up. You kill Darya, you get the main prize. But there's a problem. Darya's last act before she died, or perhaps after she died, was to protect Elias. Silas laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You're spinning fantasies, detective. My daughter is dead. I mourn her in my own way. I accept the inheritance that is my due." The blood in the foyer, the amount of it. It looked like a killing blow. But what if it wasn't? What if the letter opener only looked fatal? What if the wound was deep, but not immediately mortal? Enough to stage the scene, but enough time for her to make a final desperate move. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You killed her, Silas. The wound was real. The blood was real. But the visit to Elias was real too. And in the minutes before she bled out on your marble floor, she did something. She changed the paperwork. She transferred assets. She recorded a video confession about the murder. Or she just whispered a final instruction to her unconscious brother. Something to ensure that the gold you craved never touched your hands. And she had an accomplice. Someone who cleaned up the mess and drove her to the hospital to complete the final mission before she finally succumbed to the wound." Silas's eyes went wide, not with fear, but with a horrifying realization of a loose end he hadn't anticipated. That figure on the camera, that wasn't Darya in the final throes of life. That was Darya, sacrificing the last drops of her life, using her final strength to win the ultimate game against you, her father. She became an evidence paradox, dead in one place, alive in another, just to spite you and save her brother. He finally cracked. Not a confession of murder, but a confession of a deeper, more profound cruelty. "She was always a selfish child," he hissed, his face twisted into an ugly mask of rage and grief. "Even in her death, she had to play her damned games. She tried to tell me Elias was lucid sometimes, that he was awake in there. She was obsessed with him. She was going to give him everything, everything I built. So you staged the scene and made sure the time of death was ambiguous enough to allow for that final, impossible visit. You let her bleed out slowly enough to give her a chance to go to Elias, betting she wouldn't make it, but knowing that if she did, the paradox would confuse the investigation. It's a grand gesture of a crime, Mr. Sterling. The perfect cover for murder. A dead woman caught on film. Too illogical to be believed." I walked out of the library, leaving him alone with his first editions and his $12 billion problem. I knew I couldn't pin the murder on him using the footage. It was too bizarre, too easy to dismiss as a stunt or a sophisticated forgery. But Darya had won the war. The paperwork she must have filed, the secret will, the last testament whispered into her brother's ear. It was out there, protected by a ghost who bled out on the marble floor. I closed my notebook, the leather cold beneath my fingers. I have the body. I have the suspect. I have the footage. And I have the chilling truth that a dead woman can be a more formidable opponent than a living one. The wealth of the Sterling family didn't just buy them houses. It bought them the right to bend reality, to stage their own deaths, to become living paradoxes. The question that keeps me awake, staring at the ceiling, is this. When the evidence is impossible, and the crime is too rich to be solved, does the pursuit of justice become just another form of self-deception? Or is the paradoxical truth enough to serve as the final, silent judgment? Subscribe to the channel, and leave your like for more stories of crimes, secrets of powerful families, and investigations no one dares to tell. Until the next case.